This is News Central, and you're welcome to NC Debrief, the show where we analyze and break down political, social, and cultural issues that affect us as Africans. I'm Tolulokwe Adileru Balogun, and today we're looking at internet and social media regulation in Africa. My guest with me right now, I have the Executive Director of Paradigm Initiative, which is a pan-African social enterprise working on digital inclusion and digital rights through its offices in Cameroon, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. I have Gbenga Shasan joining me for this debrief. Gbenga, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. I know you have a long and storied expertise and history in this area, so let's do a quick introduction. We also have a second guest joining us. His name is Caleb Somtochukwu Okereke. He's a journalist based in Uganda, and Caleb has written for Al Jazeera, BBC, NPR, and many more. He's also the managing editor of Minority Africa. Caleb, thank you so much for joining our conversation.
Thank you for having me too.
All right, so a quick introduction of our topic. Now, it's broadly accepted that there is a close relationship between development and access to information. Increasingly over the past 2 decades, the internet has been a major factor affecting the right to development. The United Nations said of this right that every human person and all peoples are entitled to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy economic, social, cultural, and political development. Today, all African countries have access to the internet, though the digital divide remains huge within and between countries. However, that access is threatened by governments who, for their own reasons, threaten to or go ahead to restrict internet access. Now, Gbenga, let me start with you. The first case of internet shutdown in sub-Saharan Africa was in Guinea in 2007. Now, more than 10 years later, we are seeing more of these shutdowns and threats of some level of restrictions across the continent. Governments claim that they ordered these internet shutdowns for several reasons, ranging from the need to ensure national security and public order to preventing students from cheating during exams. You've worked extensively in this area. Are the concerns and the reasons that governments are giving, are they valid in your estimation?
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Guinea because the internet was just shut down again during elections. It's become so predictable. You know, Ethiopia shut down again in some regions, and the shutdown is still continuing. And the interesting thing is that there is no correlation between many of the excuses given and the actions taken. So we're talking principles of proportionality. You don't kill a fly with a grenade. You don't punish someone who forgot to bring their homework, back to school with suspension. And at the same time, you do not say that because someone has said something that you do not agree with, you want to send them to jail for 3 months or make them pay fines of 300,000 naira. I know that, there have been excuses across various countries to say that, oh, we want students not to cheat during exams. Well, guess what? If students can cheat during your exams because they're going online, then maybe something is wrong with the educational system and how the students are being taught. If you say that you want to shut down the internet to control the flow of information, what we've seen is the exact opposite. When Uganda shut down was the time the whole world found out what they were trying to hide. When you try to hide something, you create a black market for that information. So if it is to, restrict information, it doesn't work. If it is to give the excuse of morality and security and all that, the question we'll ask is it national security or your security as a coward politician? So what we've seen is that there is no proportionality between the actions taken to shut down the internet and the excuses given by many governments. And the way to look at it is the many different bills that have been introduced for it. In Nigeria, you've seen from 2015 what was called the prohibition of frivolous petitions bill, which itself was a frivolous bill itself, all the way to 19, when you're now having the bills that have been nicknamed social media bill. One is on hate speech and one is on prohibition of false information, a manipulation on the internet. So what you can see is an agenda looking for an excuse to happen, not a applied to a problem.
All right, we're going to get into those bills, especially as to how citizens can be part of making their voices known and their thoughts known on this. But Caleb, let me come to you. Now, in 2016, a report showed that out of 22 countries that had disrupted the internet, access to the internet in Africa at a point in time, 17 were authoritarian, and these were defined as states in which power was concentrated in a few people and governments exercised political power arbitrarily. The remaining 5 were categorized as hybrid regimes, that is, governments that have some elements of democracy but also have strong authoritarian practices. Now, looking at those definitions, of course, we're also going to get into the World Press Index 2020. Caleb, what do you think these threats of internet shutdown and different pieces of legislation around the continent aiming to restrict social media, what do you think it says about African governments and the state of democracy on the continent?
Awesome question, Tolu. I think the first thing this data says is we must look at social media regulation within the context in which it exists. So it's not just that African governments are regulating social media, but why are they doing it and what do they fear? When you come to Uganda, for example, we have the social media tax, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, and it started in 2018, where we're mandated to pay 200 shillings every day to use social media. And at first, the government said it was trying to raise revenue from companies that make money off of internet users in Uganda. But then eventually it opened up and said it was trying to prevent online gossip and chit-chat of some sort. So what this thing says, at the bottom and at the rudiments, is not just that African governments are afraid of social media, but it is why. And I say, and I dare say it is because of the potential of social media to help people think and express, and it's not something new. Governments have always tried to control thought and expression, and social media just offers them a new way to do that.
Okay, so Gbenga, I'm coming back to you. You've already mentioned some of the proposed legislation in Nigeria, but we also know that calls from mainly politicians have actually heightened in the aftermath of the NSARS protest. The National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speech bill passed first reading in late 2019. The Protection from Internet Falsehood and Manipulations Bill 2019 that you mentioned is still on the table. There is obviously ongoing conversations, and we've seen Nigeria's Minister of Communication, Lai Mohammed, talk about the fact that they could have restricted social media during the protest. They're considering restricting social media because they believe it seems to be a bedrock of false news. What are the scarier aspects of some of these bills that citizens must be on the lookout for, particularly as it pertains to the bills in the Nigerian context?
I think the first irony, in March, when this particular bill, the Prohibition of False Information and Manipulation on the Internet bill, which of course was also christened the fake news, the social media bill or the fake news bill, when we went for the public hearing, it was very clear that was the burial ceremony for that bill. But now we're expecting the committee to send their report, which then will either say this bill is or consider it for third reading and passage. And so we are with that. We know right now the Senate is busy with the national budget. Kudos to them for the budget. But when that comes out, we'll find out what's going on with the committee. The interesting thing is that the elements of this bill, first of all, it gives some opportunity for internet shutdown, right? It says that the security agency, by the way, that security agency is the Nigeria Police Force, which is the same police that is under the spotlight, which is it's a cycle of evil and half-truths and all that. The same police is brutalizing people. People protested against that according to their rights, and now you want to use a bill that puts the police in charge of correcting the same people. That's one. The second is that some of the fines that are proposed for people who share information that contradicts government official figures. Now, that is very worrying. That is worrying because we know the history of Nigeria. It's a country that can't even count itself well. It's a country that when you hear government say that, something is 70%, just know that it is more than 70%. So if you leave a provision for any government agency to be able to say this person has said something that is wrong and that is supposed to incite, and the usual excuse of national security is also there. So what you will find is that there are many loopholes in a country where there is no opportunity to seek redress when people have been falsely accused of saying the wrong thing. Imagine on October 20, the military showed up in Lekki. People said so. People were killed. That has been, disputed. But guess what? Now the military has come out to say, well, we were there, but we were asked to come by Lagos State. If there had been law, it means that some of us would be in jail now for tweeting to say that the military was present at the toll gate. Now, what would happen when the military then comes out? You send these guys to jail, you send me to jail, and then the military comes out to say, well, we were there, but we were invited by Lagos State government. In Nigeria, I will likely rot in jail because there's no opportunity to seek redress. And that's why we think it's important to talk about it.
Okay, we're going to continue this conversation because there are those who say social media and the internet is a new world. And for a new world, you need new legislation. And then we definitely need to get into a conversation about the solutions. What does the media do? What does the public, what do citizens do in regards to this? But that conversation continues when NC Debrief continues right here on News Central. Thank you so much for staying with us. This is the Debrief, and we are talking internet and social media regulation in Africa. My guest, Gbenga Chassan, Executive Director of Paradigm Initiative, and Caleb Okereke, who is a journalist based in Uganda. Caleb, let me come to you. And I do know this question will also go to Gbenga as well. There's been a lot of criticism from the press, from the media, from civil society of how African governments are putting in legislation. Now, some say that this is a whole new world, social media, the internet, and because of that, new legislation is needed. And there are some that say it's not needed. You have laws on libel, slander, treason, defamation that are on the books. What do you say to the people who say that there's a requirement for new legislation? Caleb?
Awesome. I think when people say that they require new legislation, they often use this to defend their need to be oppressive. It is never said to talk about how do we protect people on social media. It is never said to talk about cyberbullying laws as often, but it is used mostly when they want to talk about how to regulate social media. And it's because they fear the potential of social media. I do, and I'm not blind to the fact that social media is a whole new world. But even in the new world, there's still constants to human rights. People should have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought. These are not things that are exclusive, to our world as is. So as much as we want to put a focus and say, oh, social media is a whole new sphere where we have no control over or what we don't know, it doesn't, however, give precedent for us to then stifle on people's freedom of speech, freedom of expression, which is most often what we have seen happen, several times.
Gbenga, what do you say to those critics? Especially you hear them very vocal here in Nigeria. You hear them very vocal in Uganda as well. Those saying it's a whole new world. It's a brave new world. We need regulation for the new world.
So there are areas where people can make arguments to say, okay, we need to plug gaps and things like that. But when it comes to these two issues of disinformation and dangerous speech, aka fake news and hate speech, what we've seen demonstrated so far is that all of the people, look at the recent example on Nigerian Twitter. Somebody said a celebrity was responsible for some of the crisis that happened in Lagos, and the person was sued based on existing laws. And the person who was sued countered the lawsuit and wrote a letter from his own lawyers based on existing laws. The cybercrime law, by the way, another problematic law, as you may know, Paradigm Initiative and other partners are actually in court, in terms of that law, because Section 24 of it has been exploited, and also 38. But in reality, many of the problems that people have identified today are covered by existing law in the many countries where this is being talked about. And what is very clear is that every time there is a very high level of citizen expression, there is almost immediately a wave of government representatives speaking about producing new laws. Occupy Nigeria, NSAS, fees must fall. Across Africa, you look at it, it's like a game. there are protests, there are campaigns online, then government introduces taxes, and the president in Uganda, for example, says, oh, it's because they have too much money to spend on rumors online, let's tax them. But how that is working for Uganda, by the way, Uganda lost 3 million internet users, which basically means loss of revenue for the government also. Yeah. So clearly this idea that we need to introduce new laws is an excuse. What is really the reality is that every time they see a new wave of expression online that they can't control, they can buy, many other platforms, but social media, it is literally impossible. And the good news is they haven't seen anything yet. Governments across Africa haven't seen anything yet. We will see an explosion of internet access across the continent over the next 5 years. And we will see which governments will want to fight what they can't, in battles that they can't even win.
And it seems that a lot of young people believe that governments truly don't understand the access and the power and of course the tools that are at the disposal of young Africans, because they're still thinking somewhat in the ways of older generation of politicians in addressing issues. So let's look at something, and that is of course civil society and citizens and the media. So let's just look at a few things that have happened in recent times on the continent. Tanzania restricted access to the internet and social media applications during its recent elections. In June of this year, Ethiopia imposed an internet shutdown, which lasted for close to a month in response to unrest, which followed the killing of a prominent Oromo singer and activist. Zimbabwe, Togo, Burundi, Chad, Mali, and Guinea have also restricted access to the internet or social media applications at some point this year. In 2019, there were 25 documented instances of partial or total internet shutdowns, compared with 20 in 2018 and 12 in 2017, according to Access Now, which is an independent monitoring group. But while we focus on the continent, we also have to note that this is a global trend. It is a rising global trend where more and more countries are restricting internet access. Now, this is up to 213 shutdowns globally compared to 106 in 2017. So, Caleb, on the media side of things, because journalists, bloggers, we've seen them arrested on trumped-up charges across the continent, what can the media do in terms of fighting back against the possibility of internet shutdown and social media regulations?
Awesome. It is very characteristic, Tolu, of African governments to respond to everything with force, and they are translating this brute model into social media as well, without, as you said, realizing how much is at the disposal of young people. When the social media tax was put in Uganda, the government says it was trying to raise revenue. However, we know that 3 months after it was put in, about 2.5 million users of several services like WhatsApp, Facebook dropped. People stopped subscribing, and those who didn't had a new form. So many people started using VPNs, which meant that the government only raised about 17% of the intended revenue they had in mind. As media and as journalists, I think our role, first of all, is to resist. As much as that seems like a difficult and sometimes hard thing to do, resistance is our first go-to, because we have no other form of, we just resist. And we, again, do this by providing accurate information, by having conversations like this, by letting people know how this can happen, what this can look like, places where this has happened. Yeah. I know that during the NSAS protests, there was a lot of, I think, Zikoko and several others did pieces on how to survive or how to come on the internet if there was an internet shutdown in place. So our role, first of all, is to resist, then it is to inform. Okay. So while resisting, we're also informing people of the potential ways they can survive an internet shutdown should it happen.
All right, so Benga, the same question to you as we're wrapping up, but looking at it in terms of the civil society and as well as the citizens. You've said that Paradigm Initiative as well as others are in court on the Cybercrimes Act, and there's ongoing conversation about the separate bills, the hate speech bill and the social media bill as well. What do the citizens do? What does social media do? Quickly.
So quickly, 3 things. I think the first thing is, as civil society has already started doing, and government must now do, we must continue to educate everyone to allow them to spot false information and not share it, because there's a lot of education that needs to be done. Anyone who uses WhatsApp knows that people will share things that lean towards their bias. By the way, we welcome the National Orientation Agency of Nigeria to the club of people who are now campaigning. They've always had the national budget to do that job, and they never did it. Now they're welcome. Second is proactive disclosure by governments to avoid gaps that can be exploited by merchants of false information. Government needs to stop playing the cat and dog game. Put out information out there so that when false information comes, we can know that there is already truth or at least some level of information out there. But to keep quiet and then come back later to say, oh, by the way, they put out false information, to say, oh, you know, the false information is the reason why there was a lot of looting and all that. No, that's not why there was looting. There was looting because you failed to protect the people, to protect their property, and to protect everything, which is your job. Finally, number three, and I think maybe even the most important of all, is for the government to stop trying to work against the people that it has to work with. Okay. You must work with to create a community of practice that creates a set of norms that would allow us to discourage false or dangerous information sharing. This is the reason why the platforms that, the social media platforms have what is called their community standards. We have to create norms. It is not by regulation. Every country that has tried to go the regulation route has failed with it, as we can see.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Gbenga Shasa and Caleb Somchukwu Okereke, for joining me on today's debrief. The issue is, this is a conversation that has to continue and has to be ongoing, given the fact that there is legislation in play in many African countries and there is proposed legislation as well in the pipelines. Don't forget that you can join the conversation on our social media handles. That is at News Central TV. Also using the hashtag NCDebrief. Let us know your thoughts on internet shutdowns and social media regulation across the continent. Again, a very big thank you to my guests, Caleb and Gbenga. We will definitely have them back as we expand this conversation. I'm Tolulokpe Adeleru Balogun. Until next time, do have a great day.